What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another EU market breakdown for November 18th, primarily the London session, because that is what I ended up trading yesterday. We were able to grab three great entries. Actually, three great entries and one loss, and we'll go over that loss, and we're going to explain why that was a loss. And again, I'm here with Kagan.
Hello.
Who's here to basically ask any questions along the breakdown that you guys might have.
I'm your guys' voice in this journey, I guess you
There
might
we
say.
go. Thank you to the 14 views we got on our last video and to the 2 subscribers. Let's see if this thing will grow, and let's see if you guys will become profitable too by kind of seeing how I trade and how Kagan is also now trading as well.
Right. And since this is like a journal type of channel where we're really trying to every day post what happened in the previous day, you guys keep us accountable and everything like that. So again, if you guys have any questions or want to go more in depth on a certain trade that we took, please feel free to either DM us on Instagram or put in the comments below, and we'll get to it, honestly.
There we go. Well, we're going to try and keep this video under 15 minutes because we don't want to make it too long.
Right.
So let's hop right into it. Let's start off with our high time frame view. You can see in my last video, you can see the overall high time frame view. That still has not changed before. Like I was explaining before, we were looking for this midweek reversal on Wednesday. To kind of go ahead and start off, let's start off with the structure that I saw. We saw that structure was at first moving down, and on Wednesday, we then had this break of structure, which then kind of changed our bias to look for buys on Thursday, right? So as we can see here, we're making lower lows, lower lows, lower lows. And if we want to use price cycle inducement as one of our forms of confluence, you can see we have 1, 2, 3 cycles of drop, which then in turn had a break of structure to confirm that buys are now available into the next session day. What I saw into the next session is not only this trend line liquidity buildup, which tells me, okay, we need to stop hunt this trend line, but I also saw the daily cycle come into confluence here. Like before, like I always explain, I love the daily cycle. We were coming from an uptrend the previous day, right? We had our consolidation, right? And we had those stop hunts to the low to mitigate in order for price to go higher. This is one of the most powerful patterns that I pretty much trade throughout a daily basis, and hopefully you guys will start to see it more as we go through these videos.
And obviously it works for the sells as well, same type of pattern.
Exactly. Let's say price was coming down,
right?
Price started consolidating in the Asian, price will stop on the highs and then continue. This right here would be the manipulation. All right, so this was our high time frame bias, right? It's Thursday, so we were looking to continue the reversal of Wednesday, right? And now that it's Friday, we're looking for the daily cycle or weekly cycle to continue and take out these weekly highs, right? So now to get into the part of the video that everyone pretty much wants to see, and it's the EU intraday ping pong, right? All right. So when I first started to look at EU yesterday, the first thing I noticed was this 15-minute OB kind of resting right below the Asian session, right? Or the Asian consolidation. When I saw this Asian consolidation, the first thing I look for is where is the trend going, right? I want to identify where the trend line liquidity buildup is to know where the stop hunts are going to be in terms of the daily cycle, right? Because we had not only a high time frame trend line tell me that this needed to be stop hunted, but we also had this trend line inducing selling, right? And once we had that inducement of selling, we saw what? We saw that price stop hunted into this OB, right? We saw that price stop hunted into this 15-minute OB that had what? Inducement, right? That mitigated something from the past over here. And in turn, we had that retest that allowed us to go higher.
So originally when we were doing this yesterday, I personally thought to get in right before there, but in the end,
Right. So most people would assume, why didn't you enter here? Well,
Right.
that's strictly just my bias. The reason you could have, this is an entry that a lot of people probably would have taken. The only reason I didn't take it is because I trade time as a confluence. And from what I see here, this is still a part of the Asian session. Two, so in reality, this is actually supposed to be extended to right here, right? Because this is where the beginning of Frankfurt
Right.
starts, right?
Right. And the
Um,
biggest moves you would say are the Frankfurt moves,
I wouldn't
Frankfurt
necessarily
opening.
say you're going to grab the biggest moves out of Frankfurt. However, Frankfurt is a good way to identify where the trend might be going. Again, every day doesn't look like this.
Right.
However, as of if there were another day to look like this, I would trade it like this, right? So
Gotcha.
to kind of get right into it, what I saw was the Frankfurt stop hunts to the low of the Asian box, right? I saw that 1 minute structure was down. However, 15-minute and high time frame structure was starting to build a bullish bias. So because of this, I wanted to check to see, okay, did this mitigate something from the past? And of course, it mitigated this little area of demand, which was the decisional of this extreme, right?
Mhm.
So once this was confirmed, I then took this as a viable OB and was able to take entries here. Once we
So
had,
you would
go
say
ahead.
there's like order flow right there.
Exactly. So this in a way was pretty much a case of order flow. And if you guys don't know,
Yeah,
M1
if you want to explain
order
it to them.
flow tends to be your highest probability lower time frame order flow, especially M1 continuations post mitigation of a high time frame OB.
And if you would, if you could, you want to quickly show them an example of order flow for the people that might not know what it looks
Sure,
like.
sure, sure. So let's say we were doing M1 continuations, right? Let's say we came from a higher time frame OB over here and we were pushing sells. Well, I would say that, okay, this was an extreme. Let's pretend that this connected, that price connected here to this extreme. This would then produce order flow. And theoretically, when price taps here, it would then move down. There are, of course, very specific scenarios in which this would work. Obviously, this didn't, but that's because there was reason as to why that didn't. Um,
Right.
anyways, well, let's go ahead and get right back into it. We can see on the 1 minute that we had our first break of structure here, right? We're holding these buys, and eventually we sweep the highs of the Asian. I did not initially start to see 1 minute structure come back in until we had this sweep here, and we have developed this sort of formation here, right? So we sweep the top of the Asian, right? We had this retracement. I didn't know that these two bubbles were here until price came up and swept again, right? As soon as we had that sweep and price came down to what? Break structure over here, I now know that price has done what? Price has diverged, right? Has had a divergence. And because we've had that divergence, it confirms, this BOS confirms the sells, right? So that tells me what? We need to sweep whatever form of liquidity was before this BOS in order for price to continue lower.
So would
Why?
you
Because
say
structure is king. Yeah, go ahead.
so? Would you say that right there when it sweep the Asian highs, is that when it was going back up for the second time? Is that what you were looking for? The quick sweep and then the break of structure?
Exactly. So you can look for a deviation, some type of divergence in order to confirm that. Um, if we simply had, per se, okay, price came and swept, came down, built up liquidity, and then swept these lows again, that is also fine. It can look like this, it could look like this, or it could look like that, right? And you can kind of see where that deviation is to kind of confirm those tops and bottoms.
Gotcha.
All right. So basically, the reason why I grabbed this entry over here is I actually moved on to the seconds time frame in order to kind of see that mitigation within there. If you were truly just trading the 1 minute, you probably would not have gotten that entry, and you actually would have had to extend your OB up to there.
So would you say that, looking back, usually you wouldn't be taking that type of trade because you're not usually looking in the seconds time frame?
Generally I'm not really looking in the seconds time frame. This really isn't where the overall move is. Only reason why I took this was because of the 1 minute structure that was being developed post Asian sweep,
Gotcha.
right? Which kind of gave confluence to these sells. I knew at the same time that price was going to come back to here and start buying up again. Now you're probably wondering, how did I know that was going to start happening? Well, after this break of structure, we had this little bit of 1 minute liquidity buildup, which can also be seen on the 5 minute, right? We saw here that there was also liquidity buildup just above this. Many are going to assume that this is the inducement. This is not the inducement. This has no structural relevance to price whatsoever. The
So
true,
so
yeah,
how do you determine that right there? That
how
it's
do
not
I,
inducement? Like because
exactly,
there's no structural.
I'm about to show you. So we
Okay.
see on the 1 minute that we have these blue dots, right? You cannot put a blue dot to any of this right now. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to be a clear retracement. This is so minuscule, right? Think of consolidation as turbulence, right? Look at how little this turbulence is compared to this, right? We only want to be taking our true pieces of turbulence, our true pieces of structure. As we can see, we had this huge retracement here that caused this push up, right? I know that this is a true structural low, which is in turn our true inducement, right? Which tells me not to take these buys here, right?
Gotcha.
All
Gotcha.
right,
Gotcha.
awesome. This was also, again, the first liquidity buildup post break of structure, right? So there are numerous things here telling me that, okay, this is the correct trade. If you were not able to basically catch it right off of the instant entry here, price also gives you a pin bar here with bullish, right, price action to tell you, okay, this is about to pop. So this is pretty much what happened during the London session for EU. These were some of my entries. I did not trade New York. However, New York still gave uh, great entries for buys. It's actually very, very similar in terms of M1 structure. If we look here, we had that sweep that caused price to go lower. We then had this break a structure here, right? Here was that true inducement,
Right.
which had exactly, see,
Because
this
the
is
one
all a lot,
before that,
right? The one before that
before it
was not
wasn't it, right?
structural because that was actually equal highs. This all right here is just liquidity. It wasn't true inducement to me. This was the true inducement,
Mm-hmm.
which then created more structure here. So I know this is true structural liquidity buildup and then swept these lows, right? And once we swept these lows, we swept right into order flow, right? Which caused the push to go higher. And now
Gotcha.
look, if you wanted to take this high time frame, it would be, look what happens on the 1 minute. We have this break of structure on the 1 minute, right? And all of a sudden we come up here and now more structure is being formed.
Right.
So now we can
Gotcha.
kind of understand how I was able to ping pong EU throughout the day and kind of get a read on it. Again, every day does not look like this. There are going to be better days than others. It was a Thursday post midweek reversal. Thus, it was able to kind of make these types of moves.
Gotcha. And if you
Keep
would quickly, just for everyone just to see overall what happened, you want to quickly just jot down the amount of pips that you got, or where you got most of your percentage out
True.
on the
Well,
trade.
really, the moves where I'm going to have the highest RR are really out of Frankfurt, right?
Yeah.
Frankfurt doesn't mean you're going to have the biggest move. However, from a risk to reward perspective, your OBs are generally very tiny and have very little risk to it. As you can see, this was only 1.2, and you had the ability to move that down to 0.08, which or 0.8, which is less than the spread. You'd have gotten a 1 to 30. I was able to grab a 1 to 19, and I was extremely happy with that because I took my
Right.
entries off of the high time frame.
Right. And where did you get most of your positions out of?
Whenever I'm trading Frankfurt and I get the bottom of Frankfurt, I always have my first TP at the top of the Asian because I know just as equally as we can sweep this medium inducement, we can sweep this immediate medium inducement, and the same could happen.
Which
right? Which would
it did happen,
be
ended up going back up, but that's what happened.
right. This is actually a daily cycle pattern. It's also a liquidity inducement pattern, which is also known as the Asian whipsaw. Post whipsaw, you expect price to come back down and generally mitigate something down here. However, instead, this was the true area of mitigation, which caused the push higher. And you can kind of see structure kind of develop as I
Oh,
drew those out.
gotcha.
So again, I wanted to keep this video short. So we're pretty much out of time here, but if you have any more questions on how I took these trades, how I made this analysis, how I analyzed this, please reach out because this is beyond SMC concepts. This is a combination of, yes, retail strategies that I still use
Yeah.
today. Why? Because they give confluence to the smart money concept trades that I am taking. I also use variations of beat the market makers, such as like price cycle inducements and whatnot. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out, DM us on Instagram, follow our Instagram to see full market breakdowns, and I'd be happy to talk with any of you about this.
All right.
With that being said, hopefully you guys learned something today, and make sure to subscribe and like the video.
All right. Yeah. Thank you guys.